Going through the God of War games, one thing that really struck me out was during the fight with Kratos and Thor at the start of God of War Ragnarok. Thor kind of represents the old God of War fans. Like, don't get me wrong, the Norse God of War games are really popular, way more popular than the original Greek trilogy. But the more popular something is, the more hate it gets. I mean, I remember when God of War was more popular than Devil May Cry, and as a result of that, Devil May Cry fans would basically call God of War Devil May Cry, but for babies. And as a result of the Norse God of War games getting way more popular, that has of course attracted way more haters and detractors. There are a set group of God of War fans that do not like the direction that Kratos went into, being more responsible, being less reckless. Some people even claim that Kratos is weaker, which is objectively wrong, because if you actually play the Norse God of War games, not only are the enemies more challenging, but Kratos himself is still very strong. As someone who's been a God of War fan since 2008, I gotta say I like the new direction that the God of War games went into. I remember my first time going through the God of War games, and even on the PSP games, a lot of the God of War games not only played very similarly, but they also kind of had the same story. Kratos goes on a road trip, fights some monsters, does some puzzles, fights a god at the end, then he gets screwed over at the end. Rinse and repeat until God of War 3, but even then, Kratos still kind of gets screwed over at the end of God of War 3. The Norse God of War game, story-wise, went in a more different route. Kratos still goes on a journey, fights monsters, solve puzzles, fight a god, but it's really nice to see that Kratos doesn't get screwed over at the end of the game. Like, did the Norse games have story issues? Definitely, but to be fair, all the God of War games have story issues. I was just really happy to see that at the end of God of War Ragnarok, Kratos finally gets some sort of good ending. Like, don't get me wrong, trust me, I know, I played all the God of War games. What Kratos did in the Greek saga was absolutely terrible. However, I feel like, he sort of just redeemed himself. And as a result, I was very happy to see that Ragnarok and, God of War 2018 give him a more positive ending. I mean, after all, we spend time playing this character, and, most of us don't want to see Kratos get screwed over. And to be fair here, while young Kratos was a terrible person, the Greek gods weren't any better. There's all sorts of messed up stories, especially about Zeus. But let's get back to the main topic of this video, the video title itself. About Thor and God of War Ragnarok. I feel like this is one of the most perfect depictions of Thor ever. Like, yeah, he looks fat and out of shape, but he's still very muscular, very flexible, basically superhuman. He's brutal, he's murderous, he's vulgar. He's basically like young Kratos. Seriously, listen to the dialogue of their first fight.
Now show me this god killer I've heard so much about!
You think you can come here, become a daddy, get a clean slate? That ain't how it works. You're a destroyer, like me.
This is the foreign god that begs
A lot of this dialogue that Thor says, is a projection of what a loud minority of God of War fans think of modern Kratos. A lot of people don't think Kratos is brutal enough nowadays, which is objectively wrong, because when you take off your nostalgia lenses, the Norse God of War games are way more bloody and gruesome than God of War Chains of Olympus, God of War 1, God of War 2, and God of War Ghost of Sparta. I recently replayed God of War 1 on PS Plus, and I was actually kind of disappointed with, how tame it was compared to God of War 3. Like, don't get me wrong, the Greek God of War games were pretty bloody, but they weren't exactly gory. No, the gore stuff wouldn't really come along the way until God of War 3, when, the games could perform on better graphics and whatnot. Thor basically wants Kratos to just lose his calmness and just go back into that old rage mode. And, Kratos still does have that rage within him. He just has it under control now. And I feel like a loud minority of Greek God of War fans just don't see it. Like, did you not pay any attention to the Norse games at all? They're still very brutal.
Leave my
When Thor slams on the ground in frustration, it kind of reminds me of the tears of, old school God of War fans who are like, oh my gosh, these Norse games aren't brutal enough, even though the Norse games are very much still very brutal. So yeah, just judging from this dialogue, I'm just saying Thor basically represents the old school fans who completely missed the point of the Norse games. And it's perfectly fine to, enjoy the Greek games over the Norse ones. I just don't get what fans mean when they say, oh, I miss the old God of War games. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You can still go and easily play the old God of War games. Like, they haven't disappeared. Yeah, Chains of Olympus and Ghost of Sparta aren't on PS Plus for whatever stupid reason. But even then, you can just, emulate those games. God of War Ascensions, God of War Chains of Olympus, God of War 1, God of War 2, God of War Ghost of Sparta, God of War 3. Those are 6 games in total that basically reuse and repeat the exact same formula. Like, if you want to see Kratos angry and depressed and not learn anything and not really grow as much as a character, outside of having his sad little flashback, that's perfectly fine. However, don't underestimate the Norse games. And I can even understand not liking the new gameplay that the Norse games have to offer, but don't act like, Kratos isn't brutal anymore, because he very much damn well still is. Why is Kratos more calm and cautious now? Because he actually has something to live for, or actually someone to live for, his son and some new friends. By God of War 3, Kratos pretty much had nothing to live for. That's why he was so much more reckless when it came to killing the gods. His family's gone. Oh wait, he has a Spartan army? Well, I guess Kratos doesn't really care much about his Spartan army, because when he kills Poseidon, he doesn't even reflect at the fact that he pretty much just drowned his whole army and city. 6 games of Kratos being an angry, thoughtless character. The formula got tired by Ascension. Anyway, please make sure to not subscribe to this channel. And if you disagree with what I gotta say, just leave some hurtful comments at the bottom. Let it all out. Let those angry, nostalgic God of War tears come out. Because at the end of the day, the Norse games are still better. I'm almost finished playing all the mainline God of War games. I would play Chains of Olympus and Ghost of Sparta, but they are not legally available right now, and I don't feel like emulating them. It's been a pretty good ride. I mean, God of War 1, looking back, is actually very basic. God of War 2 and 3 are really good games. God of War 2018 has the best story, but yeah, since it's one of the longer God of War games, it does get very repetitive later on. And currently, I'm replaying God of War Ragnarok. Some people say God of War Ragnarok has a disappointing story, or the story's not that good, and I'm like, look, have you seen the other God of War games? I mean, besides 2018, most of the God of War games have very basic or not so good stories. I mean, for Christ's sakes, God of War 3 has a crappy anime hope saves a day message. God of War 2 is mostly filler, and the first God of War game is especially really nothing special story-wise. God of War Chains of Olympus definitely wasn't that special. I mean, God of War Ghost of Sparta, why do people like that game? Because, I don't know, Kratos' brother is in it, and then he has to sacrifice himself or he loses his life. Like, nobody really talks about Ghost of Sparta outside of that one part during the end of the game. And nothing about God of War Ascensions really stood out besides, the really good graphics. Like, God of War 2018 was literally the first God of War game where other characters actually had depth and development outside of, just focusing on Kratos. Seriously, replay the older God of War games. Like, the side characters and whatnot, like Athena, are very, very underdeveloped. And the older God of War games didn't really have that many, good villains too. Like, why didn't Zeus help out Helios or Hermes or Hercules, fight Kratos? Like, why did he let them go against Kratos one-on-one? That was just really bad writing.